Hi, my name is Terry Burnside. I have been carving wood and sharpening tools for over 25 years. Today we'll talk about what I have learned about stropping over this time. We will strop three different tools which represent the most common profiles used. These are a roughing knife, a gouge, and a V-tool. This will provide examples of sharpening that will cover the vast majority of the Carvers kit. What is stropping? Stropping is a part of the sharpening process in which an edge is polished by dragging it across a strip of material, usually leather. The leather strip is glued to a flat or square piece of wood and may be bare or loaded with very fine abrasive. All sharpening techniques remove some amount of metal from a tool. The amount removed by stropping is very small indeed. This is normally the last step in the sharpening process, and it's what we use to make the tool, now this is a scientific term, scary sharp. Why do we strop? Stropping is normally performed for one of the following reasons. The first reason is to polish a tool that has been honed. Honing is used to restore a proper V profile to an edge that has been dulled and lost its necessary shape. Honing is an aggressive sharpening technique that normally leaves rough lines, burrs, and edges in the blade. The stropping step will remove these, refining the edge and creating a razor-sharp tool. The second reason for stropping is to restore a razor edge to a tool that has been used but not blunted. Carving will slowly blunt any edge, but if a tool is stropped frequently during carving, the edge can be restored to the point of making it effective without honing. Does my stropping technique differ from a traditional sharpening method? Well, yes, it does. It's a hybrid. I will point this out as I go through the demonstration. Let's go to the demo and see how stropping works. All right, I will show you several strops that I have used, and do use, and then one of these we'll use later on in the demonstration. This is a paddle strop. It has leather on two sides. On one side, I've used an abrasive, loaded that with an abrasive. It is an intermediate abrasive, yellow in color. The other side is unloaded. I also use that same abrasive on a small contoured strop. And I'm showing you these because I carry these with me in my traveling kit. They're small strops that I can, and because of their size, I can take them almost anywhere, and they're very effective. So this contoured strop is cut, just a block of wood, to fit different profiles of blades, as you can see. Again, it's my traveling kit. The abrasive that I use actually came with this strop. It's from FlexCut, and these abrasives last quite a long time. You'll notice it's in a block shape, a little bar kind of, and that is typical. I'm going to show you three strops that I use to as a set in a process, stropping process. You'll notice this one is darker, kind of a medium color, and then this is just plain leather. This is loaded with an aggressive, coarse kind of material, abrasive. This is a moderate sort of stropping material, abrasive. and this is unloaded altogether. Similar to that yellow bar that I showed you, here are the bars that I use to load these strops initially. Black for this one. Again, the most aggressive, coarsest kind of stropping material. This is white. I use these to help sharpen blades that might be a little tough to get to with a single flat strop. One that I'm going to show today because it kind of gives you a good compromise between those contoured strops, a simple paddle strop, and allows you to do quite a bit of sharpening with a single tool. It's a four-sided strop, a block of wood, square cut with a handle. The first side, leather, is loaded with this black material, abrasive. The second side, it looks awful dark, but it's an old strop, and that kind of happens with age, is loaded with this white abrasive that is much finer than that black material. The third side is just leather and is used for cleaning and polishing that blade once you've finished with the abrasives. And then the fourth side is not leather, it's nylon, and is loaded with a green compound that is a very fine polishing process, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on too as I strop. Okay, this is the strop that I'll use in the demonstrations today. By the way, I didn't go out and try to make this up and try to find these materials myself. I bought that with that strop that I showed you last, the four-sided strop, and with some instructions to show you where and how to load the abrasive, and then what sequence to strop in. So we will take a look at what we need to do to sharpen a rough-out knife using this four-sided strop. Let's talk first just a little bit about several basic rules for stropping. In this case, we're going to be using a knife, but these rules generally apply to any tool that you're stropping. So, we want to drag the knife across the surface of the strop. In some sharpening activity, you may actually push the knife across a stone, but that's not the case with stropping. So we want to drag the knife across the strop. How do we determine what angle the knife should be? Well, for a knife, the bevel on a knife is generally 10 to 12 degrees, let's say. There's several ways to determine what that position of that blade should be, how it should be held. One is to estimate the number of degrees that the blade is from the strop by starting with it perpendicular to the strop, that's 90 degrees, halving that, that's 45 degrees, half that again, that's 22 degrees, half that again, that's 11 degrees. So I guess you could say it's pretty darn flat. What do we need to know next? Well, when you're stropping a knife particularly, because it's a dual bevel, you want to strop both sides. You want to take care as you're doing this not to roll the knife over when you go back in the opposite direction. As you make the end of the stroke, pull the knife, lift the knife up from the surface, and to make sure that you don't accidentally roll that blade over, the safest thing to do is just to turn it in the opposite direction and go back again. Lift, turn, lift, turn, like that. Okay, that's the second thing. The third thing is pressure. You might feel that as you're dragging this across, the harder you press down, the sharper your blade will be. That's not the case with this kind of sharpening tool because it's leather, and leather gives, it sinks in, and if you press too hard, if you muscle it, you may just take the end, the edge that you're putting on there right off again as you press it down into the leather. So there we go. I typically, if a knife is, if I'm just resharpening while I'm carving, I typically only do 6 to 8 strokes on each side. If you find that's not sufficient, when you test it at the end of the sharpening process, you can just do it again. But that normally is fine for a resharpening. This idea of resharpening is very important while you're carving. If you will stop after you've used a blade for 15 to 30 minutes, depending on how heavily you're using one single tool, and strop it, you'll find that you don't have to do any extraordinary sharpening measures for quite a while. Try to remember that and follow that. It'll save you time and save your save wear on your tools too. Okay, so I do that on that side. I'll remove whatever fine particles of steel and grit might be on the blade with an old rag. Go to the next side, do the same thing. 6, 7, 8 strokes. This is the second side is a little lighter abrasive, more of a polishing compound. And finally, I move to the third side and do it again. This side is just leather that's unloaded. This particular leather is old, and this one has been used quite a bit, so it's pretty dark. And now, when I'm done, I'll lift it up, and sometimes, usually, I'll test my tools to make sure they're sharp enough, and I do that simply by shaving my hands or my wrist hair and see what that does. And that removed the hair, so I figure he must be okay. In this part of the demonstration, I'll talk about and show you a little bit about sharpening a gouge. Rather than going through the entire demonstration like I did with the knife, we'll just show the differences and talk about them. Much of the technique is the same. For instance, going from one side to another, the rough side, the smoother side, and then the leather side is still the same number of strokes, but there are differences, and these are those differences. First of all, the gouge is a single bevel tool, the bevel being on the rounded side, so we don't have a second edge to drag the tool down the strop on. The second thing is the gouge is curved. Well, and because of that, our technique in sharpening will be a little bit differently. We still start on the same rougher, more coarse side of the strop and drag the tool down, but as we do it, we rock the tool so that we can get the full surface of the edge. Going down one side, again, because it's a single bevel tool. Now, I don't know if you've noticed or not, it might be kind of hard, my hands may be obscuring this, but the tool is held at a much steeper angle, about twice what the blade is at least, because the bevel on a gouge is much more pronounced than that on a knife. So we drag down. As we drag, we rock. We only drag one side. Now we're finished with this one, and we're not going to sharpen the other side because it's not beveled. But what we might want to do is make sure that there are no micro burrs still on that side, and we'll do that by lightly dragging the back side of the tool on the edge of the strop. And we go ahead and go through our process of sharpening. It's 2 and 3. And when we're done, we test the blade. Now we could actually shave our arms to test the sharpness, or shave our hands, but I usually use a piece of wood. And just any old rough piece of wood. In fact, a rough piece of wood is probably better than a smooth one. And what you're trying to do is just make sure that that blade is not dragging across the wood and ripping the fibers. In this case, it looks good, so we're done. All right, this part of the demonstration, we'll show the third tool that we said we were going to, that I said I was going to demonstrate stropping, and that's the V-tool. The V-tool is a single bevel tool, kind of like the gouge. And rather than going through the entire stropping demonstration as I did with the knife, I will just show you again the differences in stropping the V-tool. We have 2 outside edges or beveled edges on the V-tool, and we want to drag the tool down the strop, lift at the end of each stroke, try to keep an even stroke. And like the gouge too, this has a steeper bevel, so the angle that we hold the gouge at will be a little higher. And we'll sharpen both those sides about 6 to 8 times on each side, like we did the other tools. Now, another difference between the V-tool and the gouge is this keel or spine on the back of the tool. This needs to be handled also, and to do that, we'll run that keel down this V-shaped notch in the strop several times. And what we're trying to do is get a little bit of a burr, clean up the outside edge, way down in the point or the crotch of the V. When we're finished with that, similar to the gouge, we're going to try to remove that little micro burr from the inside. We're not sharpening the inside of the blade, we're just trying to gently remove that burr. And then we'll repeat that sharpening process on sides 2 and 3, and we'll be done. Now, when we finish that, we again want to test the V-tool, and we're not going to try to shave our arms with this. That takes much more coordination and daring do than I really want to try to. We'll try this on my old trusty board again. I'll do kind of a shallow cut, see if we can get a nice little curl up, and I did that, and a little bit deeper cut, and make sure the blade is sharp as it goes up higher, and it is. I get no drag marks. It's a smooth cut. So we're done with that one also. During the demonstration, I had mentioned a couple of things that I haven't addressed yet, so I'll take the time now to do that. The first of those was how I can use this four-sided strop to avoid honing every time I sharpen my tool. That's fairly simple. The explanation and the secret sauce, if you will, is in this first side. I use a relatively coarse abrasive on this first side, and because of that, when I run my blades across this surface, I create a burr that is very much like the burr you would get if you performed conventional honing, but it's on my strop, and I do it much less, and it creates a very, very small bead and very, very fine scratches, imperfections in the blade. Okay, that is how I can avoid honing quite so much and why I strop as much as I do. The second topic was, what do we use this fourth side, I'll find it in a minute, there we go, this fourth side of the strop for? The answer to that is pretty simple. When I do honing, traditional, conventional honing with a stone or a wheel, I have a blade that is scratched and deformed enough that you can actually see it without a microscope. You can see it with a magnifying glass, and sometimes even your eyes. So in that case, when I hone, I go through the same process I would as if I was stropping, and then as a last step, I run the blade across this nylon surface with a very fine green polish on it, and that takes out any of the visible scratches, ridges, and burrs you might have in that blade. And that's what the fourth side of that strop is meant to do. Thank you for listening, and happy carving.